Deuterium. Deuterium depleted water, deuterium depletion. What is deuterium? Deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen, that first element in the periodic table. Hydrogen has a proton and an electron, whereas deuterium has a neutron, making it heavier than hydrogen. It's actually twice as heavy. And we know from quantum physics experiments that deuterium doesn't quantum tunnel as readily as hydrogen does because of the size. And we know that when you substitute deuterium for hydrogen, the effect is much different, especially in biological systems. Now, deuterium was discovered in 1931, but in the last few decades, there's been a lot of research about how deuterium impacts living systems. We've seen that deuterium can have a positive effect on cancer outcomes, especially breast, lung, and prostate cancer. We've seen that deuterium affects cardiovascular function as well. Recent research just came out showing that deuterium can increase our heart rate, right? It actually has a big impact on our mitochondria. Because of the effect of the difference in size of deuterium, it actually can affect our ATP production, that energy source in the body. And ATP production and mitochondrial function overall is so important to our health. Any dips in ATP production or mitochondrial function have been associated with symptoms and disease states almost across the board, right? It's really foundational to our health. Now, deuterium is a signaling model, right? In and of itself, it is not poison. It has a valuable role in our biology, right? It reminds me of some of the research maybe 20 years ago about reactive oxidative species. When that first was discovered in our biology, it was like, oh my goodness, these things cause oxidative damage. They're bad. We need to get rid of them, right? The research there with cancer, lung cancer, showed that antioxidants and quelling those reactive oxidative species did not have an improvement on cancer outcomes. Why? Because there is an intricate and sophisticated communication system in the body, a signaling that's happening throughout our body, and deuterium is the same way. We see from recent research with people who had high blood sugar, high glucose, diabetes, where they took 30 people and put them on deuterium depleted water for 90 days. They found that half of the group, 15 people, had an increase in their insulin levels, actually, whereas the other half had a decrease in their insulin levels. And all people in the research study had an increase in their body fat that was not accounted for by body mass index or body fat overall. Why are there such contrary results when we look at deuterium depletion and deuterium enrichment? Because deuterium is not a pharmaceutical. It is not a poison. It's not a one-way street. It is a signaling model that communicates valuable things in our body. And so just like that research about reactive oxidative species, where we all jumped the gun and thought, okay, these are really bad, we have to get rid of them, I see the same thing happening with deuterium depletion. Now, I am very, very grateful for the work of researchers like Dr. Stephanie Seneff and Dr. Laszlo Boris. I think that we are just starting to understand the role of deuterium. It has been largely ignored in mainstream medicine and science, and I'm very grateful for their work, and I really respect it. But I think that some of us have taken the ball and run with it. Now, deuterium depleted water can be really helpful in some situations like cancer and really severe metabolic issues and cardiovascular issues, right? There absolutely is a place for this. But this is really expensive. Deuterium depleted water is really, really expensive for everyday interventions to improve our health. Not only that, but there's this popular rumor out there or movement to really restrict all deuterium in the diet. And what we have to understand is that our mitochondria and our microbiome are huge regulators of the deuterium content in our body. Our microbiome, those bacteria that are beneficial, like lactobacillus, they actually excrete deuterium, whereas other species readily ingest and deplete deuterium from our food. So this, again, balance that's happening in the body, creating this sophisticated landscape of communication is really something that we have to keep coming back to, and we have to be respectful of. This makes deuterium really important. When there's deuterium enrichment, we see that it can act as an antioxidant. It can decrease reactive oxidative species and increase cell growth. It can also, when it's depleted with deuterium depletion, it can increase reactive oxidative species. It can slow cell growth. That's one of the reasons why it can be helpful in certain cancers. Now, we know that deuterium plays a role in the body in several different ways. It is acting as an antioxidant, like I said. It seems to be acting as a cell growth modulator. It has a role also in our cell membranes. It adds stability to some of our biological membranes and components in the body. So oftentimes we think in this physical world, right? Deuterium, get rid of it. It's poison. Reactive oxidative species, get rid of it. They're bad. And I'm absolutely not saying that they don't cause damage, because they do. Too much of those things are not good. But this overall black and white thinking without acknowledging this intelligence that our body has, this sophisticated communication network that, that's functioning overall in the body, is so very important. We now realize that those reactive oxidative species are important and have crosstalk with our microbiome, with our mental health, with so many different biological functions in our body, and just getting rid of them is absolutely not what we want to do. Rampant reactive oxidative species can cause a lot of damage, absolutely. And they're the cause of environmental issues, right? Our diet, our lifestyle, our exposure to different toxicants. And that's the same thing happening with deuterium. And so while deuterium depletion and deuterium depleted water can be really helpful in some situations, I think that we have to recognize that it's also serving as a communication signaling molecule in the body, right? I mean, deuterium has a completely different charge than hydrogen does in the body. It's sending a different signal. It's less electronegative because of that neutron, right? It's less electronegative. It has a different frequency. And when we think from a quantum biological perspective that there is this invisible blueprint, right? This language of frequency that's guiding life and biology in this universe, on this planet, in our bodies, we have to recognize that there is a place for this communication. There is a place for deuterium in the body. We know that it acts as an antioxidant, right? It quells reactive oxidative species. It works in tandem in this communication network. Maybe that's one of the reasons why that research with reactive oxidative species in cancer showed that you can't just knock that communication network out and get an improvement in cancer survival, right? Because there is this intelligent communication throughout the body. So what do I do with my patients and myself and my family? I don't treat cancer. There are wonderful, incredible naturopathic physicians out there, licensed naturopathic physicians that do a wonderful job treating cancer. I personally don't see that in my practice. So what I'm doing is I'm using deuterium depletion practices that focus on really impacting our mitochondrial function, focusing on our sleep, focusing on our diet, focusing on our movement, focusing on our circadian rhythm, and all of those different inputs from a quantum biological perspective that give us health, light, sound, frequency. All of these things have a huge impact on our health, and this is where I focus on most people. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe, give me a like, and give me a comment down below and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for joining me.